right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, President Trump, he takes the RNC stage tonight for his keynote address at a critical juncture in this campaign. And as Crystal and I have covered here, the aesthetics, at least so far, have been generally pretty good for him. His chances in the battleground states are tighter than they were in 2016 at this exact same time. And suddenly now, with less than 70 days to go to the election, the campaign is at least trying to hit some of the working class themes which got him elected in 2016. I have no prior knowledge of what will be in Trump's final keynote speech tonight, but if I had to guess, it will be a reflection of this administration, which it's a mixed bag. Trump is once again, he's a lifetime entertainer. He's a communicator who took working class themes in 2016 and ended up getting into office and listening and empowering many of the people that he actively disagreed with, largely because he never seemed to care all that much about policy, which sets up a very difficult dynamic no matter what comes in 2020. Whether Trump wins or loses, there's going to be an epic fight over why. If Trump loses, the GOP establishment and others will say that he lost for the reasons that Joe Biden is running to be president. Basically, aesthetics. Trump broke too many norms. He tweeted one too many times, and he was a uniquely distasteful guy who's just a fluke of history. Now, the GOP establishment and the Democratic establishment want you to believe this because it absolves them of their decisions and complicity in architecting a system that was so easily pushed over in the first place by a former reality TV star billionaire. On the other side of the divide, there are going to be folks like myself who will counter that if Trump does lose, it will have a lot less to do with his personal manner and much more to do with the unpopular regressive tax cuts, which is the only major legislative accomplishment that he holds to date. That Trump actually lost because he listened too much to the D.C. establishment and he strayed from the message that they hate so much. On the other hand, if he wins, it's also very dangerous. The RNC, the Trump campaign, and the establishment forces, they will sell him on the idea he won because of the Trump tax cuts and not because he briefly returned to a culturally conservative, economic populist message at the end of his campaign against someone like Joe Biden. So either way, an epic fight is coming, and it's critical that people like us win, because if we don't, I'm genuinely convinced that a Republican lawmaker will never again get elected in my lifetime. That should concern some of you on the progressive left too, because if the GOP becomes a permanent minority party, you can forget about progressives ever having a shot at making these neoliberals learn their lessons. They won't care about you, and they won't care about me. I've become increasingly convinced over time that as much as politics matters, I think policy matters even more. Trump's presidency is the perfect example of how you can have a political victory without a policy one. And so understanding how exactly this all works and the immense disadvantage that populists have whenever it comes to actually getting their agenda passed is critical. Coincidentally, just as I was writing this radar, I saw a story about GOP lawmakers flash across my timeline, which underscores this dynamic. It's from Lee Fang over at The Intercept, who reported how GOP lawmakers, including Senators David Perdue, Tom Tillis, and Richard Burr, have all privately lobbied the U.S. government to allow in more low-wage temporary agricultural guest workers, despite each having said at various points that they support an immigration system that supports American workers. That story reveals how these lawmakers know that they have to publicly say that they're for an American immigration system that works for its citizens, but when it comes down to it, they act against it in corporate interests. The chief aim of any populist movement has to be to generate what many on the progressive left have done with some limited success. Have more people than just me call out this blatant hypocrisy, but also actively make them pay. People who subvert the interests of their voters and lie to them should be primaried and forced to pay a political price. Every single one of them deserves to lose. The problem that people on the right faced at the beginning of Trump's presidency is, frankly, they put way too much trust in Trump himself, just like progressives put too much faith in Bernie Sanders. Movements have to be bigger than any one man or woman. They have to develop the ability to check even their own figurehead if they go astray. So if Trump does win, or if he loses, you need an apparatus that goes after every single one of these Republicans, that recruits candidates, that helps them fundraise, that gets them media attention, and more. And the establishment GOP will lose their minds. If you think the DCCC is vindictive, you do not know the right-wing donor world. But this is the only way. A second Trump term or a civil war following his loss has to be fought just like the establishment fights. Dirty. You have to go after their power centers, their money, expose them to the voters. And I won't pretend that it will be easy. But after witnessing so much political opportunity get squandered by so many plutocrats, I don't think that they've left us any other choice. More so, we actually have to have some optimism. The people are with us after all. So I'll end with a positive note. We have to try and praise everyday lawmakers for going against the grain and actually doing something which is right, and something I'm going to try hard to do more so on this platform. Today, a shout out to Congressman Jim Banks, who's done some impressive work on China, and he called out American businesses who sell out American workers. Yesterday, he actually introduced a measure that would block hospital mergers. This is a joint measure with Democratic lawmakers, and ensure that federal antitrust staff end price gouging in the healthcare industry. It's not perfect, but it's a start. And it comes the very same day as a report that hospitals owned by private equity firms rake in 30% more income than hospitals that aren't. So as long as lawmakers are willing to at least start and fight for people, we need to be willing to sit down and listen and help them see the light as they move forward. And I think that's one of the most important lessons that we're going to see, Crystal, which is we can talk about aesthetics. We can talk about the last 70 days of the Trump campaign. And if Trump does win, there's a huge risk that he's just going to hire all the same people. Fox and the campaign and the RNC are all going to be like, and people like David Perdue and Richard Burr will be like, oh, Mr. President, you won because of that tax cut. That's why we need tax cuts 2.0.
Yep.
There has to be an infrastructure which says, no, actually, if you violate your word and if you're a duplicitous liar or, a possible alleged criminal like Richard Burr, you got to go. You have to be primaried. You have to have an infrastructure which is willing to do that. And it's not popular amongst a lot of these people, but it's actually the only way. And I was thinking actually about Richie Neal. Even if Richie Neal wins this primary against Alex Morse, is he really going to be as brazen with his behavior? He's not. And that's power too. Knowing, be like, I got to cover my flank. I got to do something. That's a marginal win. It's not a great win, but it's something. And that's something that we have to focus on too.
I think that's a really good point, and it is one of the most hopeful parts of the left right now is that someone like Richie Neal, someone like Lacey Clay.
Yes.
I mean, these guys have been there a long time, and they have never had to answer for the way that they sell out their constituents, Elliot Engel, until now. Now's the first time there was ever any scrutiny on it. And one of the pivotal issues in that Richie Neal race is very instructive. It's on surprise medical billing, which is something that he blocked during the Obama administration. And it's only now that the left has even remotely any of the infrastructure to actually make that case to the voters. And by the way, it's landing. Alex Morse has a real chance.
Yes.
Not to say it's not in the bag, far from it. He's still the underdog, but he has an actual chance. And I think you're right. We know Richie Neal is not going to behave in quite as brazen of a way because he's already flipped his position on even that issue. Now he's out saying, I'm the only one who has a plan to end surprise medical billing. So you can see it work in real time. Real question for me, if there's a Biden administration, the flip of what you're saying is the left really going to call him out and hold him to account in the way that they really didn't do? There are a few lone, brave voices out there who I applaud greatly during that administration, many of whom, by the way, we have on this show. But by and large, you couldn't criticize Obama. You still can't criticize Obama. And that's basically been how it is for Trump. The only dissenters aren't on the issues that he ran on and saying you're not living up to what you said. Yeah. They're about norms. They're about being respected abroad. They're about civility, right? It's the Ben Sass and the Mitt Romney and the Justin Amash. That's the critique that you've heard and that Democrats are happy to hear and comfortable with because the other critique is frankly uncomfortable for them. In a second Trump administration, honestly, it's hard to see how that really changes.
It is difficult to see how it changes, but that's part of what I'm saying, which is that you actually have to force Trump create an organization and create an infrastructure, which makes it so that if he strays from his message, he actually could pay a price. The base is beholden to him. But Trump is a self-interested figure like all politicians.
Yeah.
If you want to win, this is the way that you win. The real battle was his ear, really, and the influence of the RNC and all these other people convinced him that this was the way to win. Most politicians are deeply impressionable, and they don't think deeply about anything, I can assure you, many congressmen. So what you need to do is just be like, look, this is your agenda. You want to win? This is what you need to believe in. If you don't, we're going to get you.
And I guess I have more faith in the Trump base than a lot of people would. Look, there's a core group that they're with him no matter what, right? They love him. That's their guy. They're going to defend literally any decision that he makes. But we've seen over the course of these past few months, people thinking for themselves.
Look at the RNC internal report we talked about on the show yesterday, where it was like, oh, actually, all the people who voted for Trump in the Midwest started to stray away from him the moment that they felt like blue-collar issues were no longer a priority for the administration. And you're absolutely right. If you ever go to a Trump rally, you can actually see Trump and the base in real time. It's like a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
Where Trump will throw out the stuff that the speechwriters write for him. And in some cases, he'll be like, well, that didn't land. He'll like say it in front of people. And so he's like live testing and seeing which are the issues. That's how immigration and trade, and I mean, there's a reason he stuck to them, is because he could see during his speeches that it actually resonated. I agree with you, which is that people with the base, I mean, they'll give you a chance, but they're not going to cheer or be enthusiastic or try to defend many of the, go to a Trump rally and see whenever he talks about the tax cuts. There ain't no cheering there. Yeah, I mean, people are like, I guess. Right. And then he'll start talking about trade and everyone goes wild. That, I think, we have to have more faith in the voters and give the voters, too, an opportunity to make their real voice heard as a check against people like Perdue and Tillis and Burr. None of these people should be going around trying to claim a mantle of Trumpism or anything else, especially when they're lying behind the scenes.
Whoever wins this election, the fights within both of these parties are going to be incredible to watch with incredibly important consequences for the future of the country.
I think that's right. All right, I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.